What is going on, SoFi fans? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today I want to give you an overview of what is happening to SoFi, go over some of the data points, what shorts are doing, and where I see things going in the short term. Before I get into any of that, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And with that, let's get right to it. So currently it is down 1.51%, a lot of volatility. So 828 being the low, 866 is the high, a lot of volume. So 19.12 million shares being traded, 22.8 is the average. Unfortunately, today is selling off, and there's a lot of fear associated to the whole CPI data that did come out, on which both the year over year and month over month were a little bit higher than the forecast. So 3.7 versus the 3.6 for the year over year, and then on a month over month it did come in at 0.4 versus 0.3 the forecast. And if you actually look at the month over month, the true breakdown, it's not as bad as what a lot of the mainstream media is portraying it as. Because as you can see, this is that 0.4%, so the month over month increase, and largely the big increase was due to energy. And that's one big negative of CPI, is just the heavy weightedness of energy and food. So if you kind of subtract and just do the basic math, that does mean that other basket items did go down pretty considerably. So once again, going back to CPI, it's not as bad as what the market is trying to really portray it as. But that's just my own opinion, not financial advice. You guys always do your own due diligence. When it comes down to specific to SoFi, there was no SEC filings. There was this news that did come out, on which it just says the fact that a lot of new Gen Z and millennials are willing to skip out dinner just to focus on retirement. And ultimately, it does say that SoFi is going to be doing this. So they're going to be matching 1% to boost your retirement, which this hands down is a brilliant idea, because typically wherever someone has their pension, you are going to have other products. You're going to have checking accounts, savings accounts, credit card, mortgages. You are going to have everything. SoFi is going to be, you're going to grow with SoFi, or I guess vice versa. SoFi is going to grow with you ultimately. So in reality, this is a very brilliant idea, and this definitely will bring in a lot of new members, increase the products, and it's going to be a win-win. So this is a very, very good idea in my opinion. When it comes down to it though, I'll go over some of the data points and many other things, starting off with options. So $2.91 million in calls being purchased versus 775,000 in puts. So based on this information, people are anticipating for it to trend up. Specifics for calls though, looking at the open interest, this shows all the call options, strike prices, expiry dates. Based on this information going into next week, it is anticipated to be roughly between the $8 to $9 range. So I do feel that's fairly realistic, especially considering historically about 2 weeks prior to any earnings, there is a nice run up that does always happen, a FOMO rally. And unfortunately, because of after earnings, there's always a sell-off. That's just what happens with SoFi. Regardless of how good the earnings is, there's always just a random sell-off. So kind of unfortunate, but regardless, there is most likely going to be a run up until their earnings. So that's going to be in roughly about 2 weeks. So that's something just to keep in mind. If you are bearish on SoFi as it stands, looking at puts, it is anticipated to be roughly sub around 750 by the end of next week. Keep in mind, options activity, whether it be that or this, does not move the stock price. It is just merely a sentiment. But as far as big transactions, there's only been a small handful today. So these are the transactions over $100,000 on the secondary market. So clearly a lot of smaller transactions, especially based on the volume that I did bring up. But over and above that, looking on this, these are some of the transactions that have occurred on the dark pool. So oddly enough, no transactions since October the 2nd. So it's been kind of quiet. When it comes down to dark pool, that is linked to shorting. So I will give you an overview of that. And as I've signaled in the past, I'm not saying that SoFi is going to be a squeeze by any means. I'm just bringing this up as a benchmark. But short score is currently 61. Utilization is 32.15%. And as far as what shorts are doing today, they are returning 37,000 shares. So the fact that they are returning on a red day shows that they feel it's not justified. So definitely that's a positive thing, kind of matching with the options activity. 13.35% of the free float is being shorted. 112.61 million shares overall are being shorted. Cost to borrow average is opening up a little bit higher, and it is around 3 3.12%. And Interactive Brokers short availability does indicate that there's about more than 10 million shares available. So if shorts really felt that this was a justified sell-off, they would be increasing pretty significantly. And this is the latest round of 13F, so it is that time of season when institutions do disclose their position to the SEC. So these are the latest ones, and some pretty good ones. This one did return about 90% of their position, 14% flat, anything green is brand new positions right here. So a lot of smaller fish. A lot of the bigger names are most likely going to be the tail end of October, close to SoFi's earnings. So I think that'll be a fairly good thing. But still, on a side note, all of these transactions also did occur within Q3. So that's something just to keep in mind. But there was a new analyst rating that I just wanted to share with you. So Dan from Mizuho, who does have a 47% success rating, did give a $15 price target on SoFi, especially leading to the earnings. So that kind of came out of left field, and I think genuinely that's a pretty positive thing. As far as some analyst forecasts, it looks like not really much has changed since my last update, I think around 3 days ago. So the same goes for earnings per share and revenue, not really much change for there. So it did go from 512.83 million to 513.54 million for the Q3 revenue. So analysts are a little bit more optimistic about SoFi's revenue than what they were roughly a couple of weeks ago. So definitely, I think, a pretty positive thing. But as far as where I see SoFi going, so looking on the actual chart, it is flirting right now with that 100-day moving average. So it is still higher percentile of the Bollinger Band, and that 100-day moving average has been that saving grace so far for today, even though it kind of did break below it a little bit first thing, but it is still holding. As far as looking at some of the fib levels with it at $8.45, it is between this P and this R1. So $8.18 is the next strong support, vice versa, $8.88 is that next strong resistance. Didn't really touch either of them today, so once again, I do feel that most likely today is an overreaction. People are going to realize that there might be a little bit more of a value rally possibly tomorrow, but regardless, I do feel like there might be a little bit more of a FOMO run for SoFi in the next couple of weeks that could push it potentially to kind of mid nines. I don't see there being enough justification for it to break above this $9.31, which is that R2, but you never know, it could come very close to that. Let me know your thoughts on SoFi. Give yourself a shout out if you have been buying, selling, holding. What have you been doing with SoFi? As well, when it comes down to the CPI data that did come out, do you think that this is a cause for concern? Do you think that the mainstream media is accurate about this? So what's your viewpoint on all of this? If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And finally, if you do like my channel, want to support the growth, take a look at my memberships, link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, I appreciate all of you watching, and let's all make a lot of money on SoFi.